toward the One,
the
the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty,
the only being,
united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of guidance.
So tonight we are gathering to discuss a part of our studies by name the resurrection body, and also the imagination. And I'd like to begin with words of Ibn Arabi, actually Henry Corbin, in describing Ibn Arabi. One name of this book is Alone with the Alone, or A Creative Imagination in the Sufism of Ibn Arabi. Creation is epiphany, that is, a passage from the state of occultation or potency to the luminous, manifest, revealed state. As such, it is an act of the divine primordial imagination. Correlatively, if there were not within us the same power of imagination, which is not imagination in the profane sense of fantasy, but the act of imagination, or even called imaginatrix, none of which we show ourselves would be manifest. We would not be perceiving anything without that imagination. Here we encounter the link between a recurrent creation, renewed from instant to instant, and an unceasing theophonic imagination. In other words, the idea of a succession of theophanies, which brings about the continuous succession of beings. So what this is saying is that this creation we think of as, well, it happened a long time ago, and now here we are, and this is how the world works, and we just have to deal with the way the world works. And what this is saying is, no, that's not the way things are, that things are refreshed all the time. We go back to that moment of creation through the beings that are in creation, in the human divine form. But most of the time we are asleep to that. And we think that we're one of the items in this creation, rather than we have anything to do with the imaginatrix, that imagination which can change the entire universe. So we're going to be speaking some about this tonight, about what is this imagination. We are not just in the business of creating objects to decorate our homes. We are in the business of being one with that one who creates. You want to jump in here?
Yeah, so last time I talked about that we feel and we think that we have a direct experience of the reality around us. But in actuality, even talking about the 5 senses that we have, the way that we experience through any and all of those senses is through something that's reconstructed in our brains, through the visual center, auditory, kinesthetic, and so on. So we're not having a direct experience. In a sense, we could say that we're living in a simulation of what is actually outside of ourselves. And that's just given. We don't have to do anything for that. That develops in the course of maturation of our nervous system over the years. In terms of creative imagination, as the Sufis talk about it, that's not a passive experience. In other words, it isn't just a matter of watching whatever might pop up, oftentimes in reaction to something, or sometimes through actively feeding a train of thought, daydreaming, so to speak. But this is not the type of creative imagination that we're talking about. In fact, this type of creative imagination, which the Sufis also call the true imagination, only takes place when we have that linkage between the manifest human part of our being and the divine or transcendent part of our being. And we've been talking about the barzakh, the meeting place, the intermediary place in which the two sides come together. So the function of creative imagination requires both sides participating in it. We can't bring it about solely from our manifest side, and we could say even the divine can't bring it about solely through the divine side. It's only through this interrelationship, which even Arbi terms bi unity, bi-unity, or Hazrat Khan says that ultimately we are human-divine beings. So we're going to be talking about how to actuate this creative faculty of our soul that actually, as Ravani Ra was talking about the new creation that the Sufis say is born again at every instant, brings something afresh at every instant. Because if we don't awake to that aspect, that potentiality of our being, then what we get, and you could say this is the default setting, is a repetition of what's been, a projection forward into just a linear continuation of what we expect to happen. And then no significant change really takes place in that. But in the participation in this new creation, we can actively participate in it. Pure Light would talk about we become capable of participating in the divine programming. And Hazrat Khan talked about the difference between being like a machine or being like the engineer who can change the machine to carry out different functions.
So something to think about in regard to our imagination and those things that we create is, where is the fruit of our imagination gathered? What is it that we are actually doing in our creations, in our use of the imagination? Is it producing things that we see in the manifest world, putting things in art shows, making music? Well, these are all things that maybe are part of our exercising this. However, what we're really exercising, what we're really creating is, just as Azarbash was saying, in the barzakh, in this intermediary realm. It's like this is the place of the weaving of all of it, the weaving of the divine with the already manifest through this being that you are, and that all of us are. So I have a little story for you, something that happened to me this week. So I was laying in bed, I woke up maybe 3 in the morning. I don't know if any of you do this sometimes, but sometimes I'll wake up and feel, well, I'm not sure how that went, and just got a little worrisome and wondering. But when that happens, at least I do know this now. Then I need to get up and meditate. I need to bring the parts of myself together again, and to be with God and feel that that hopeful place where we meet. So I got up and I meditated, and I felt so much better. But a little surprise there, I felt this place I meditate, I want to say, is also my studio. So there, I'm sitting in the studio, and now I'm feeling at one with God, almost like we're buddies, very close and almost jocular, happy together. And I felt, why don't you make yourself a beautiful blouse? Now, this is something that I've done several times before, but I certainly never thought of doing this in the middle of the night in my meditation. It was like, well, here's a piece, try this over here. So I felt that intuition to grab this fabric And oh, here's another one. How about red? And I'm wearing it right now, everybody. So I okay, and brought the creation that I'm speaking about right now, and it pulled off many different pieces of fabric from the shelves, just feeling like here I was with my dear friend. So we have many ways of connecting between the manifest and the divine, and this was a kind of a personal way of putting a blouse together. It could come in many different ways. I know that a lot of us feel that divine touch as we do a creation of something we write or something that we create in music or something like that. But thinking about what has been gained from that is not the blouse. What has been gained from that is a strengthening of that bond, of that ability of ours to be at one with that divine. And that can be gained through many different ways, but that is the treasure. And the other part of the treasure is this, that you are the treasure, that your own realization is the treasure. And that is what is accumulated. And as our son who lives on the other side of life says, did you know, Mom and Dad, that what your realizations actually create fountains and beautiful castles and slides and rivers on this side of life, the side that he's on. So we have an amazing friend in our own son that's on the other side communicating back with us. So what does this do? This thickens the presence, I like to say. Presence that we have can be thickened or maybe made adamant, strengthened by experiences one upon another in this creative realm, but then expanding in huge ways to something much more than we began with.
So this series, as you know, is called Living in Your Resurrection Body. And we're coming at this through many different angles and vantage points and ways and methods. And so Ravani Ra talked about kind of the weaving that takes place in this Barzakh, this connection. So if you were going to weave something on a loom, you would have different colors and different kinds of material that you'd be putting through the loom. So what's put into this loom of the meeting place in the Barzakh? Well, it could be all sorts of things. One thing that's very much available is any of the divine qualities. So it could be coming together through the divine compassion or wisdom or beauty or joy or anyone that you like. And it's what arises through what's born through both sides of our being coming together, we could say through the means of or through the medium of a particular quality, what arises from that, the new creation that takes place. So that's a way of arriving at it, coming to this intermediary place in the Barzakh. But another way of arriving at it, as I've said before, that anything and everything in any situation in our external life is potentially a portal, P-O-R-T-A-L, to the sacred. And so how do we open up that portal? Well, we go from a state of constriction that we're normally in without even realizing it. We're in this simulated, very truncated aspect of the fullness of the reality in which we're already existing, but most of it is dormant and unconscious. But if we find a way of changing our way of relating to a particular situation, and again, this could be through focusing on a particular divine quality that is needed in that situation and allowing that quality to arise in the relationship between ourselves and what we're experiencing. Instead of thinking of it as, well, okay, I'm going to put out some compassion here, or compassion is going to come through me into this quality. Well, that could be one way of doing it, but you might try this instead. Just think of how the divine compassion is actuated, enabled by the light of our being in response to the light of whatever it is, another person, uh, something in nature or so on, or it could even be a whole situation going on. It could be a situation in the world, and it's not hard to think of some challenging ones of those. What's being challenged in us in this particular situation? How can we come to a state of relational unity with that situation and enable a divine quality to arise through that connection that once again is going to open up a whole different sphere of the world that we seem to be in. So a very key point about this is whether we're talking about bringing some creative something or other through into manifestation, or awakening a quality in our being in response to something, it seems like it's just bringing that down into the usual world that we're in. But if it really clicks and works, if it's really part of this divine creative faculty that's inherent to every soul, it's actually transforming the very world that we're in into one in which there's so many more possibilities. There's so much more scope of this newness to come through. And another way of saying that is no longer being stuck or bound in the conditioning of the way we've reacted to previous situations, which are the patterns that seem to repeat over and over again till we learn to free ourselves from that.
Mm-hmm. So we spoke of the weaving together of one side and the other, and we spoke of that our imagination only functions as this true imagination if we are in touch with both sides. The inner, or bhatin, is another name for the inner state, which would include the place of the divine, bhatin, B-A-T-I-N. And then zahir refers to the manifestation, Z-A-H-I-R, which you can think of, sometimes we talked about the world around us, the manifest world, as truncated version of the manifestation because of the limited way in which we perceive things. But you can also think of zahir as what we were saying as in creation, is that it is the epiphany that the divine created. So we can think of it in its way of being totally irradiated, and the epiphany of God, something beautiful that has been manifest, something that we are also contributing to in our way of imagining this world. So we have Bhatin, the inner realm, and we have Zahir. So let's do some weaving together as we say, Ya Bhatin, Ya Zahir. I think that saying them as a pair is a wonderful way of doing this. When I do these at home, I often do them as, for a while I'll do Bhatin to get the flavor of it, and then I'll do Zahir to get the flavor of that, and then I'll put them together. But I think we can go ahead and do them as a tandem here together tonight. So I'll say it for a while, and then you can join in. Ya Bhatin, Ya Zahir, Ya Bhatin, Ya Zahir. Join in with me. Ya Bhatin, Ya Zahir, Ya Bhatin, Ya Zahir, Ya Bhatin, Ya Zahir, Ya Bhatin, Ya Zahir. Let's pause for a second. So what you can do then in your imagination is to feel that you are the intersection of these two, that God has placed you in this situation so that that energy can flow through you, that energy of creation, to remake the creation in this moment through the impetus, the light of your own being. So let's continue with this ideation. Ya Batin, Ya Zahir, Ya Batin, Ya Zahir, Ya Batin, Ya Zahir, Ya Batin, Ya Zahir, Ya Batin, Ya Zahir. Let's pause one more time. So this creation is often called Ma Zahir, which means the privileged place of manifestation. So this is a endearing and a illuminating way of seeing this creation as this place in which manifestation is illuminated and brought to a glorious state. It has been transformed through your own energy. So let's continue. Ya Batin, Ya Zahir, Ya Batin, Ya Zahir, Ya Batin, Ya Zahir. One more. Ya Batin, Ya Zahir. Now as we inhale, we'll be thinking Batin. When we exhale, we'll think Zahir. Just feel that light of illumination and recreation coming through your being as you exhale. And as you inhale, you're taking in all the energy and getting ready for the transformation. And now we'll continue without thinking the words and just feeling the essence of the practice. Amen. I'd like to comment a little bit more about this practice and this idea about us really being a part of recurrent creation. I mean, it sounds like such a huge responsibility and a, situation for us, and thinking, well, what really can I have to do with all this? And it really is our own project, our own dharma, to be able to bring this down into our every little thought and every little situation, and starting with small things. You know, so small things even that, well, like mine, I guess, that I could have a friend, that God would be with me in helping me make a blouse, that I could, that every instance and every situation is a time for us to bring God into the situation. In those times when we feel like, well, I'm just in a grungy mood, and no, that's exactly the time that we could bring God into the situation. So it's again, using the imagination to think, well, this is okay. Here I am. This is the time. This is this privileged place, Maza, here that we are talking about, and I didn't think it was anything special, and now I'm realizing, yes, this is the situation. This little place here, this is what we're talking about. And not feeling like it has to be this grandiose, recreation of the universe. We start with one place. That place, as Azurbash says, every place is the place of entering in. What do you say? Portal to the sacred. That means where you are. You are the witness to this part. That part, the part you're witnessing, is where you start and is your territory. No one else has that little place. No one has that little thought. No one has that little possibility of relating to this in a new way. You want to come in here?
Yeah, well, the Sufis talk about our realm, and each of us has our realm. It's kind of like our sphere of influence, and it could be family, friends, if you work, the work environment, community, and so on. And we are responsible for what is in our realm. And the Sufis also talk about, in terms of healing, there's two aspects to healing. One is restoration. It's returning to the original state before things got out of balance, distorted, and so on. And that's important. And a lot of times we think, well, that's the end. Well, that's great. Let's just stop right there. We'll get back to a state of balance and harmony and health. But the Sufis don't want to stop there. After that, there is transformation. It's like, well, what can come through beyond the initial condition? What are the potentialities and possibilities that can arise through our being in this sacred relationship with the divine? You could say with our personal Lord, our personal angel, the transcendent aspect of our being. And we always have the capability of entering into that meeting place in the thick of whatever situation that we find ourselves in, which can enable a transformation to take place. And it sounds like, well, that sounds like some nice theory, only some very advanced, highly realized being are capable of this. No, it's not the case at all. We're all capable of this. And you remember Hazrat Khan's beautiful imagery of the ray coming from the divine central sun, and each of our souls is one of those unique rays. And our consciousness starts out just being focalized only in the manifest part, and then we have something awakens in us, and we have a desire to experience a connection with our source, the divine, the beloved. But gradually, as we awaken more and more, we can bring more of the levels on which we exist coming to the meeting place with the rest of that ray. So there's a greater capacity for now what can arise. But regardless of what that capacity is, there's always the possibility of something emerging from that meeting that wasn't there before. It's a way that the unique light that we're given in our being, and the way that that light is transformed through all of our experiences in life, is now brought to that situation, and it serves as a catalyst for bringing about a change. And it's not like we're going around going, well, I'm going to just impart all my light to these different things. It's a natural property. It's a natural property of our more awakened being, that that's just what happens in the way that we relate to whatever it is that we're experiencing. And so we go from this truncated state of experience of our life and the world, our realm, you could say, into a greatly opened up state of experience now in which so many more things can arise. So I'd like for us to do another practice, another pair of wazifas. And Pure Light would often talk about artistically and creatively fashioning our subtle body. That sounds pretty amazing, huh? But again, this is a potential we're all capable of. We have our aura, and I'm going to go back to what I talked about earlier, the kind of given in our way of perceiving. We have this simulation that our brain generates of the external world that we're in. But we have to awaken to experience a much deeper aspect of our being. Okay, so that's one part of that. Our aura is a given. It's the light field that surrounds our body that changes in response to our health. It changes in response to our emotional state. And some people can perceive auras and they'll see like, well, this looks really dark over here, or there's medical intuitives that are actually used sometimes by physicians that can spot an illness before any physical symptoms have appeared in that. So that's the given. That's what happens from the way that things are, our aura. And our aura changes in the reactions to what's going on. But what we're talking about here is we have vehicles of subtle energy and subtle light that are a part of who we are and how we exist, even if we haven't been aware of them. And we can use the faculty of creative imagination now to, as Pure Light would say, to fashion, to make even more beautiful the subtle energy bodies of our being. So if you try to do this by sitting here and squinting real hard and thinking, okay, I think the subtle energy body must look like this, and I'm going to pour some red over here and some blue over here, it's not going to work very well. Instead, you allow yourself to set an intention, and Pure Light would often talk about this, an intention for a meditation. So in this case, the intention is, well, I'd like to be able to participate in creatively fashioning my subtle energy body. Okay, so that's the intention. And then you get yourself into just a very relaxed, open state that's not trying to prefigure what you think is supposed to happen or what's going to happen. You just take as a certainty you are a being with subtle vehicles and subtle energies. And you're going to allow something to come through you that's born from the meeting in the barza of your human and divine parts of your being, that's now going to take this subtle energy body of light to become even more beautiful. And so we're going to do a practice that goes with this. And the first part of the practice is Ya Latif, Latif, which means the subtle. So now we're taking our awareness to a much more subtle level than the usual dense level of awareness of material objects and things that we, ordinary sounds and sights and tactile sensations. And we're turning to a deeper inner level of experience and awakening to a perception of much more subtle things, Ya Latif. And then the second part of the practice is Ya Musawwir, Mussawwir. Musawwir means the fashioner. So now Musawwir means we are fashioning the subtle energy body of light. We're allowing ourselves to enter this rarefied, subtle state of awareness with Ya Latif. And then on Ya Musawwir, we're enabling this fashioning of this subtle body of light. So I'll say it a few times, then you can join with me. And this is done very internally. So it's like this. Ya Latif, Ya Musaw, Ya Latif, Ya Musaw. Join with me, very quiet and subtly. Ya Latif, Ya Musaw, and slowly. Ya Latif, Ya Musaw, Ya Latif, Ya Musaw, Ya Latif, Ya Musaw. Feel this transformation beginning. Ya Latif, Ya Musaw, 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 Ya Latif, Ya Musaw. And then silently on the breath, inhaling Latif and exhaling Musaw at your own rate. And without the words, just the feeling. Impermeable light would often say, dare you have the courage to be who you really are. So, dare you have the courage to let shine forth from the depth of your being, from the multiple levels on which your soul exists and has forms to function through, to allow that precious, beautiful light, unique in all of the universe, to shine through, and to shine through not just in the subtle realms of your being, but to shine through right in the midst of the world that you function in the midst of trying and difficult situations. Can we allow that light that is a birthright and a natural property of our soul to be free to bloom forth, to blossom forth wherever we are and in response to whatever is going on in our life? And when we forget, which we will many times a day, all it takes, the Sufis talk about zikr, which means remembrance, is remembering who we are. And remembering also means bringing together the parts, bringing together the parts of us, which is the human and the divine part, which is the existence on multiple levels of reality, which is a circulation of pure spirit and many forms of light embodying and expressing the divine qualities to bring that forth into the world. That's the gift that we have to give.
Well, I'd like to share a little of my experience. Perhaps later we'll hear from you all about your experience. And I felt not only an isolated form that I could say, well, this is my subtle body, but I actually felt many, many beings, many souls in creation now, many people that, I have a connection to, I mean, a very general connection to thousands and thousands of people, and feeling that that is part of the reforming, that's part of the fashioning, that we can fashion our relationship to all of these beings. We can fashion possibilities for these beings. Our hopes and our dreams are not only for our single manifestation here, they are for all of humanity. They are for all of nature. And so this fashioner, which I had to laugh too, we started with creating my blouse here. So we've gone on to our own subtle bodies, and now the potential for reworking this creation of ours. It's a beautiful practice, and it can be so unfolding and so all-encompassing. Yes, this fashioner has hands in everything that there is, and creates with light and creates with all of the qualities. And what is needed here is our own imaginations. We are the ones that can think of all of these beings. We can think of all that is needed, and we feel that aching within us. Well, this aching is not just given to us to stop us from anything or to push us. What it is that's the thing that God cannot offer. This is what we as humans can offer. It's this potential for this aching and this living, being on the front lines and finding those places that needs this kind of refashioning. What is it that we can do? What is it that only you can do? This is our own job, our own dharma, our purpose. We're not just dreamers creating these lofty dreams. We are living beings that have deep feelings and connections with all. So what can we do? We can do so much. And now we talked about the resurrection body. I have something to add here to what we've been doing. This is again from Creative Imagination, the Sufism of Ibn Arabi, on in the chapter on God created in the faiths. And it's about the day of resurrection. The day of resurrection refers to the end of time, but also has an initiative meaning. It is the moment when the individual soul comes to understand his or her unity of essence with the divine totality. The day on which the forms of the particular faiths cease to be veils and limitations and become manifestations, mazahir, in which God is contemplated because they express the capacities of men's and women's hearts. So perhaps this is your day of resurrection. Perhaps we are rising to that day of our resurrection when we realize, whose we really are.
And this resurrection, we probably think of as some event taking place in the future, but there's the possibility of this happening at every instant of the new recurrence of creation. Let's say we're born, literally, we are born anew at every instant. Even physicists talk about time not being continuous, discrete instances of time. And the mystics talk about these instants of time, and in between there's the divine in-breath, which everything is drawn back into the divine, and the next instance, the exhalation of the divine, and then creation recurs. But even Arabi says it's never the same. It's similar to what's been, but it's never the same as what it was. It's always refreshed. And I was thinking as we were doing this practice and talking about the light that we have to bring into the world, the unique gift. And we've talked before about feeding the angel. Well, we are not only feeding the angel of our being when we enter into this state of beingness, is the best word I can think of, but we are actually feeding the angels of all of existence. We're making available a food that's it's like the manna from heaven of our soul that we bring, that it's a gift to all beings, what's expressed through us that doesn't come from anything else. And it's so easy for us to get caught up in getting down on ourselves. And I know when I was in my psychology practice, perhaps the most common problem that people had was low self-esteem and feeling, well, not very valuable and not worthwhile. But if we can in ourselves, and if we can help someone else even get the faintest glimmer of this aspect of what we really are about, it would be very difficult to ever return to that state of thinking that we weren't something precious, something invaluable. And it's our hope in all these classes that we're doing, not to just have it be something interesting or something that perhaps you have a temporary high experience listening to or doing some of the practices, but really taking to heart some of what we're trying to convey, so it can be a catalyst in your own being to blossom forth that which can only come through you. And one other thought I was thinking about, this idea of feeding the angel. Well, what do you need for food? Well, there has to be a garden, there has to be soil, there has to be seeds, there has to be water, there has to be fertilizer, there has to be the farmer to tend the garden, there has to be rain that comes through the sky, there has to be this incredible, if you've ever watched any of the scientific shows about all the things that happen in just a cubic centimeter of soil, all the organisms and bacteria and so on, is just unbelievable. There's a whole universe there. It's like all of existence is converging in here to enable the fruits and flowers to blossom forth in the garden. Well, each of us is a garden. Each of us is a farmer. Each of us is in relationship with the Sufis sometimes talk about the great farmer, the divine being, and this whole circle of life, this whole interconnectedness of all of existence that's bringing forth something through everything, and particularly through us. That, again, as Ravani Ra was saying, it's our dharma to bring that which is produced only through us to make available to everything else in the world.
Second.
You can just
So-
take a moment and,
I do have something.
okay.
So it's just staying in touch with that imagination, and just the words that he said right now about the farm, and that you are the farmer, and you are the soil, and you are, you are all of these. You are in touch with all of these things, and the more that you can, sometimes it's spoken of as that these things become transparent, but they still have the quality to them. This is part of the idea of acquiring our resurrection body, is that things that we perceive have their beingness, and at the same time, it's almost like that we have a window to them, this special window to all of these places and all of these beings. But also that window can access this creative capacity that we have, that's imaginatrix, or true imagination, that is now in touch with all of these places, all of these, we have multiple sides, jillions of different sides that can connect with these other beings. And then, if we're the ones that get the ball rolling with this imagination, then those beings also can was a yeasty kind of thing. The yeast can spread to them also, and we can now get this transformation going. May we be among those who are to bring about the transfiguration of the earth. This is how it happens.
It's all true. So let's just pause for a moment and just let yourself reflect on, not necessarily think about, but just experience what has come to you through what we've been sharing tonight. Let's take a few moments. Let us share in a simple practice from Hazra Inayat Khan, you raise your arms up like this, and we will say together, you can say it with us 11 times, pour upon us thy love and thy light, and feel that we're not only the receptors of this light, but we're also a source of this light pouring forth into the universe. Pour upon us thy love and thy light. 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 And then we say, Om.